when does passion turn into obsession?
I guess we'll never know.
Alright, I'm not going to tell you how long I spent making that intro, but then again, that's what we're all about. Escalation and deviation. You see, that's the entire core principle of this car, because we're building what we think is the ultimate E36. And obviously, for the best E36, you need the best engine. And in my opinion, without a doubt, the S54 from the E46 stands for you. This engine, the highest revving atmospheric 16-line ever produced, is the engine we're taking. Past episode, we've completely rebuilt the engine with higher compression camshafts and pistons. We've paired it to a completely custom-made E36 GTR intake system. Now this episode, we're gonna focus on something we haven't looked at before. You see the exterior of the car. Now, judging by the intro and by the thumbnail, you probably know where this is going. We're gonna go and take a lot of inspiration from the original Supertouring cars. That means bodywork that's not just available off the shelf. We're gonna have to fabricate a lot of stuff ourselves. And we're starting out this episode by making original Supertouring carbon fenders. All right, so first up, we're gonna make some carbon panels, because how hard can it be? We made some carbon pieces earlier. A fender is just 30 times bigger. Couldn't be that hard. For that, however, we need a new car. And by new, I mean one that's been undamaged, unmodified, and pretty much just sails straight, which kind of rules out all the cars in here. Well, it so happens to be we have a pristine first-time owner, no rust, E36. All right, maybe not completely rust-free, but it will do the job. Now, the problem with most aftermarket fenders is that the fender gaps themselves and the fitment is really off, especially with composite parts or polyester parts. So the thing we want to avoid is making a part which is all crooked and has terrible body lines. So we figured we're going to mount up something to the original body that's been unmodified, so we can make sure all the lines add up and it's as straight and nice as possible. So that's where this car comes in. So this is the look we're after, and initially we thought we'll just order some panels, because surely aftermarket panels will be available for these cars, the Supertouring cars, or at least aftermarket ones, and there were. We found some aftermarket panels, but the fitment on those was, let's just say, unusable. The fitment was terrible. And on a car like this, it really doesn't matter, because with the livery, you're hiding a lot of details. If you zoom in on the fender gaps, everything, it looks awful up close. But in a picture like this, going 200 miles an hour, it looks just fine. But for us, it's unusable, because in a single color car, all the gaps and all the imperfections will really stand out. So unfortunately, that's not an option. And we looked far and wide. We even visited some real Supertouring cars. And to our surprise, some of them, or most of them, were running replica fenders, because I unbolted them, and surely on the backside is not an original panel, because the original panels, they're steel. All the aftermarket ones, composite or polyester, and the fitment of those is just terrible. So ideally, you'd like to have one of those, specifically these ones, the 96 models. But if not even the original Supertouring cars can find original fenders, then how are we gonna get a set of those? Right. Don't ask me how, but we managed to find an original Supertouring 96 model matching pair of fenders, original steel ones. So we have the holy grail when it comes to E36 bodywork, and we're going to be able to use those to make replica fenders. Now, you might be wondering what makes these panels so special. Well, first of all, they're original. They're based off of original panels, and they've been completely modified by hand. So all this is hand worked based on original panels, which makes sure the original gaps and fitment is as good as we're gonna get it. Now, what's also different about these is, besides the fact that it's wider, it takes into account the original look of the car. Surely you can just bolt on some over fenders, but in my opinion, over fenders, let's not express my opinion on those actually. Whereas these panels, they're kind of retaining the original lines of the E36. So even though they're wider, they're higher up, you still have the OEM look. So we're gonna bolt these up to the stock body, make sure all the gaps and the lines line up as far and best as we can. And then we're gonna make them straight, we're gonna make them smooth, we're gonna sand them, get some of the dents out of them, and we're gonna make molds out of these ones. That's done. Alright, we managed to fit this original Supertouring panel onto a completely stock body. And that's the reason I wanted these ones, because these 96 models are the only ones, or the latest ones, that will still bolt onto a completely stock E36. The later models, they're completely different, won't fit on these. So it has some slight damages, some slight scratches, but nothing we can fix. The other side, however, a bit more tricky. It's been in an accident already, because there's a massive ding here on the inside which has completely deformed the panel. If I press here, it kind of falls back into place, but I'm no body worker, so we're gonna have to see if we can fix this. So we're gonna dive into this, make it straight, make it perfect, I don't know how, and then we can pull some molds off of these and then put them on here, because this one, like I said, I'm no body worker. Yeah, I did this myself. The damage and the repair, and this is the repair you're looking at, that's one of the reasons we're gonna have to replace these. And they're a bit too tight.
1 week later.
All right, so now that I've done the heavy lifting in terms of bodywork, because I'm a bodywork specialist, we're gonna make this as good as we're gonna get it. Because if we start making molds now, any imperfections we're gonna leave in the part are gonna replicate themselves into the mold. And that's a terrible idea, because making the mold is already a ton of work, and the last thing we want to do is spend all that time and energy into making a mold when all the flaws are going to replicate themselves into the part. So first up, we're going to make sure this is absolutely perfect. In order for it to be perfect, I got to stop touching it. So I've called in a specialist, Jordi, because Jordi is a good friend of mine. He has done a ton of bodywork in the past. He's done 12 years of bodywork. And he's actually done all the walls here. He's painted all the walls, and he's recently started his own exterior and exterior detailing business. But I'm gonna leave this to the pros. But, if you know, you know. You know who this is for. You know.
Nice sanding block.
You want to see the sanding block? you want to actually tell them what's going on? We polished for like 3 hours, or wet sanded 3 hours. Whoa, what are these scratches in here? I can't fathom why. Why don't you use a sanding block with a big scratch in it? Or actually a sanding block. This is part of the powder coating system we've developed.
Wow, die uren krijg je nooit meer terug.
People think, oh, that's nice and easy, just sand it, just polish it. What we didn't show you was 3 hours of wet sanding that didn't result in anything substantial. But we learned a lot on the way. All right, we're all ready to actually make the molds for the carbon fenders. And the idea is pretty simple. You just have the positive part, throw a bunch of gel coat and epoxy on it. You get a mold, you then throw a bunch of carbon in the mold, and you get a carbon fender. It's that easy. I wonder why not everyone's doing this. Surely it can't be that difficult. It's just very time consuming. Okay, let's... Anyway, I can't wait to actually put the carbon version on the car, because we have a really awesome front bumper lying right over there. And I haven't fitted it on the car yet, because first I want to put these fenders on, because it's going to be an awesome fit. And it's a bumper you pretty much never ever see on E36. And it's not an E46 bumper, don't worry, we're not going to do the angel eyes thing, we're not. Either way, let's get started.
Alright, in order for us to make a proper infusion mold, we need to extend the edges of the original part. You see, the edges of the carbon product are gonna be very rough, so making the part bigger and then trimming it back will give us the best results. We're simply using a plastic sheet here to help go onto the backside of the fender, which will then become part of the actual mold itself. Then we close up any remaining gaps between the plastic sheets with a special tape.
Lube it up. Wat? Ja, soms mijn Engels naar Nederlands, Engels is niet zo correct.
Lastly, we sealed the gap between the fender itself and the plastic extensions. This is done with a special filling wax and a bunch of patience. It's important that everything is fully sealed and there aren't any holes or negative spaces. If the gel coat we're applying next gets into any of these, you'll risk the mold locking itself into place and you're gonna have to start all over again. Lastly, we're applying a chemical release agent onto the surface. This prevents the gel coat from actually sticking to the part itself when we eventually take it out again.
Alright, it's a little past midnight again. We've just finished making all the flanges, which was honestly way more difficult than we anticipated, because you have to take into account the different ways you have to put together the mold, and more importantly, how you're going to take it apart again, because it's going to be a 3-part mold, because otherwise we'd have a mold and then put carbon in and you'd never be able to get carbon out. So you have to make flanges in certain locations and you really have to think about it. Luckily we had some help from one of our viewers who is more experienced in carbon than we are, and he gave us some tips and tricks on how to really make this more likely to succeed. So we're just mixing up the actual gel coat. We're gonna toss that on, head home to sleep. Tomorrow morning, one of us is gonna do the other coat. And then tomorrow evening we'll be able to really finish this side, which is part 1 of 3 of this mold of the right side of the car. Pretty much done at this point. Alright, that's it, we're all done. Easy as that, just toss it on. And it's just such a clean process. Alright, so now the next day, everything has been fully cured. Now we're gonna peel off the extra borders, because I've been itching on peeling this back for hours now.
I've been itching on something else.
Okay.
Okay.
It's looking pretty good. So we made these little tank barriers here in the shape of the... Maat, ben dan... Ik begin over tanks te praten, jij begint met het Anyway, the point is, with this, because we're gonna make another mold up against this, and this way I'll have like an interlocking shape. So we always have reference points to align the mold into. That's the theory. Alright, it's now a couple of days later. It's all fully hardened out and we've trimmed some of the edges already because we need to work on here. And we're now going to continue to make the other 2 flanges because, like I said before, if you look at this part, then what happens if you pour epoxy over this, this lip is going to be locked in. So once you make the carbon part, it's going to be locked in. There's no way to ever get it out. So that's why we have to split it right here. So once the carbon piece is fully cured, we pop off this part of the mold, and then we can take the fender out. Because that's what the film said, the introduction film. So we're going to make a flange here, one on the back side, 2 flanges, easy as that. And then we can make the carbon part. This week is now Wednesday, we can have a fully functioning part by Sunday. This Sunday we're gonna make so look well. Right, now you can really see what the idea is. So we're gonna put a gel coat over the part itself and then onto the old part and the flange we just created. So we're gonna have a separate piece that we can just take off. So once the cure is complete, we can take this part off and then the top part off, which allows us to take out the part. Probably explained this a dozen times already, but even for me, I gotta visualize it, see how it's gonna work together, because this was one big Jenga puzzle trying to fit it together. I think it worked out great. E36 gurney, multi-purpose for also stirring and making carbon molds.
All right, let's quickly show us making another 2 flanges that totally didn't take another week.
All right, well, it's some hours later. We're supposed to wait for 24 hours. We're gonna expedite it a little bit. So now we're gonna remove this part. However, before we do, we have to drill some holes in them to put some bolts through them, because once it comes loose, we need to know exactly where it goes back. Otherwise, the alignment will be completely off. On this side, we made some locating tabs on the mold itself that just click into each other, so there's no possible movement. However, on this one, we didn't, for reasons.
And just so the audience knows, you already started pulling on it before drilling and making it that.
Yeah, I just wanted to massage it a little bit. Would you look at that? Wat is dit? Haartje. We didn't even fuck it up. That's the most impressive part. There's still one piece. Would you look at that? Alright, it's finally time to make the actual carbon part. Now there's 2 ways to do it. You have the easy method and you have the difficult method. Take a guess. Alright, so the easy method is to just lay up some carbon fabric inside of the mold and brush it in with epoxy. You have the carbon, you have the epoxy, you have a finished part. Well, the problem with that is you're going to have a ton of trap air in between the weave of the carbon, and this is going to allow for pinholes and other defects on the surface, because you're never going to have a perfect surface finish with that method. So that's why we're opting for the more difficult method, which is carbon infusion. And with infusion, you pretty much do the same steps. You lay up the carbon inside the mold, but when you finish laying it up, you put it into a vacuum bag. The reason for pulling a vacuum is you have the mold, you have a few layers of carbon, and then you have the bag again. And when you pull it a vacuum, it's gonna compress the carbon fabric up against the mold. So you're gonna have a really tight finish of your carbon fabric. You're then, when it's completely vacuumed, you're gonna make an inlet and an outlet, and you're gonna use a vacuum pump to pull epoxy from one side into the mold out the other side, which is gonna replace all the empty voids with epoxy. That way you're gonna have, supposedly, a perfect carbon surface finish. And that's what we're gonna be doing today. Should be pretty easy.
Scenes. I can give you what you want, but you got to go home with me. I forgot some good old love, and then I got some in store. When I get through throwing it on you, you got to come back for more. Boys and things will come by the dozen. That ain't nothing but rough old loving. Pretty little thing, let me light your count, cause mama, I'm so hard to handle now, yes around. Lighter than word, and I'm a man with a great experience. I know you got you another man, but I can love you better than him. Take my hand, don't be afraid. I wanna prove every word I say. I'm advertising love for free, so won't you praise your ass?
Oh my God, oh hell no, man! What the fuck, man?
The next day.
Bro.
I can explain. So, after fucking around for like 7 hours, there's still a leak somewhere in the bag. And we can't find the leak in a vacuum, so maybe we can find the leak when it's inflated. Alright, this is now the third time we've bagged up the part. The first three times we had a small vacuum leak somewhere and we really couldn't figure it out. We've remade the bag, we've tried different approaches, and this time we've even gone as far as to encapsulate the mold itself in a softer fabric that will prevent the mold itself from tearing up the bag when it's being pulled vacuum. There's a tiny leak somewhere. The guy making the video tutorials specifically said not to run the infusion if you have a small leak somewhere. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I like that.
Don't wanna be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media. And can you hear the sound of hysteria?
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Alright, welcome to another episode of Carbon Production Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. We made some tiny, pretty critical mistakes. The guy specifically said, do not be tempted in any way or shape to run the infusion if you have even the tiniest air leak.
And if I see your Instagram...
No, wait. And then it followed by saying it will almost certainly result in failure. Almost certainly. We're just outside of that. That was what I was thinking. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. So this part probably failed. I'm not sure what we're going to encounter when we open it up. It's probably going to be an absolute shit show. But we learned a lot. So we're going to open this up, see what we did wrong. I mean, we know what we did wrong. And just do it all over again, because it's that easy. Child's play.
Except the back.
Yeah, I'm not even exaggerating here. I'm pretty certain we nailed every step of the way, except somehow making a foolproof sealed bag. And it's the hardest part about making carbon shit, for some reason. All right, let's open it up, see what we got.
It's going out to idiot America. Welcome to a new kind of tension. All across the internet. Everything is okay. Don't be like trees of tomorrow. We're not the ones who let them follow. It's enough to want you.
Okay. It's not that bad.
For a first class lesson on how not to do it, it's not that fucking bad.
Ik ben vasthouden.
All right, so we quickly trimmed it up, and obviously this part is completely filled. There are tons of ridging along the edges, and tons of epoxy simply missing because we didn't have a proper vacuum. So when there's no proper vacuum, once we're done with the infusion, new air starts to creep in, and that's how you get all of these tiny, it's very hard to capture on camera, but there's tiny gaps here and there where there's air where there's supposed to be epoxy. All right, we kind of fucked that up. We made some really crucial mistakes. Even though it filled on a lot of different areas, we still have a somewhat functioning fender. It's pretty light. I mean, it's insanely light. We might reinforce it a little bit more on the next one because we're gonna fix the mistakes we made earlier. The earlier mistakes were some really dumb rookie mistakes. We specifically did things he told us not to do, which was always a great idea when you're listening to someone who's done 1,000 already. I mean, I could have known that better. All right, so we're quickly gonna do another one without making the same mistakes we made earlier. We had it. We had it.
Until we didn't.
Within reach. I was already browsing the KFC menu. That's how far we were. We finished the infusion. Flawless. Absolutely flawless. So we cut off the output, and then we have to cut off the input side, and then we go home because we're done. Except you have to leave it running for another minute or two. With resin, obviously. So we were fucking browsing Instagram, and suddenly you just see the fucking bag just pop off.
One week later.
All right, well, that's curing over there. We can move on to something I've been really looking forward to, and that is the front bumper, or splitter, should I say. Because we have a stock M3 bumper, we're gonna ditch that. And in a previous episode, you've seen us fit this 97 Supertouring splitter as a test fit, because we're also not gonna use this one. I have found something a little bit more special, a lot harder to get, but in the end, I think it is the best looking original Supertouring bumper ever made. And that is the 97 model. So this is a 96 model splitter I've been talking about. This has been used for only a single year before they switched over to the later version. But in my opinion, this one with the aggressive looking front is the best one out of all of these splitters made for the E36. This has just the right look I'm trying to go for. And later with the carbon Supertouring fenders, I think we're gonna have a really unique look for this car. So let's get this mounted and finally see what it looks like on a car, because I have had this sitting for almost a year and I've been wanting to put it on a car for so long, and now we're finally getting there. All right, so over here, as you can see, this is not a complete front bumper, it's just the lower half of it, because just like the original Supertouring cars, they didn't have a full composite bumper. They used original front non-M bumpers on which they cut off the lower part and then put on the carbon or composite splitter. This is due to regulations. They couldn't just make a completely new front bumper. So that's exactly what we're gonna be doing as well. We're gonna use this original non-M front bumper. We're gonna cut off the lower half, attach that one to it, test fit it on the car.
I'm excited.
You don't wanna know how many times I've put it loosely in front of the car and just on an angle like, yeah, this is gonna look good. Let's cut. That's good. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. Alright, so we're all done with the front bumper. We did have to cut up the aluminum brace inside just a little bit to clear the airbox, and God knows what else is in the way, but it clears just fine now. So we have the carbon lower half, the original non-amp bumper, the original steel or aluminum crash bar, which we're gonna need, and and other than that, it's pretty much done. So one of the last things we'll do right before we paint the car is seal this little gap here, at which point we'll bond the lower carbon half to the upper plastic one. Not sure how we're gonna do that, but it couldn't be that difficult. So we have a smooth transition and it's gonna look all flush when it's done and painted. So for now, this is done. We can fit this on the car when the fenders are completely done, and then we can finally see what the end result is. Oh, and before I forget, we do have to make mounts for the splitter, as this gigantic splitter cannot just be held up with the front bumper supports alone. Without it, this will be pulled to the ground as it's quite flexible, so we're gonna have to make sure this gets a support point somewhere in the car. The way we're gonna do this is we're gonna make either quick release brackets or fixed brackets on the subframe of the car, so the subframe that sits beneath the engine, that's gonna hold up this part of the splitter. Now, we gotta take out the engine again to do some small maintenance. Not on the engine itself, but on the subframe it's sitting on. This very same subframe we're gonna have to make the mounts onto. You see, we have deviated a little bit out of the plan, of the original plan, which means we're gonna have to make some minor adjustments to the actual engine subframe. Nothing to do with the engine. You'll figure it out later, but we're gonna have to modify the subframe, and then while we're at it, we can make the mounts for the lower splitter. Right, so this is all done, and we can now continue with the fenders again. Thanks. It's already started. So, I'm gonna spare you all the pain and suffering that went into making the mold of the other side, the layup of the other side, and skip right to the
Can I say it?
No. We're gonna skip right to the climax of making composite parts, which is, you know, where you see the timeline spike. That's where we unpack the fender. We thought we were gonna wait making the mold of the other side until we know we had it dialed in. Except with it taking so fucking long, we thought we're just gonna go ahead and make it. And now this side is actually done before the other side is. It just came up perfectly. The mold was great, the product was great. You just gotta trim it down, fit it on the car, and then we can check back on the other side. All right, let's get this trimmed on, fitted on the car, and actually make some fucking progress. Because this...
But it's taking so long, would you say we're not going to make any more carbon parts? Okay, give it at least.
If you know, you know.
For the keen eyed viewer, this is not just one fender. Something else is brewing here.
All right, I've done the final trimming and it's now finally time to fit it onto the car. Alright, so with the fender on, I've also installed one of the front wheels from the GTR. This is a 9.5J wheel with an additional 20mm spacer, and it still fits. So we got plenty of room to work with. It barely looks any wider, yet we have a ton more room. The only limiting factor in this case is the height of the wheel tub itself. Something I probably should have done when I was building the cage, but then again, I wasn't really expecting it to go this way. So now you might be wondering, how much weight did we actually save?
Not enough for that.
Weight savings was a secondary objective, okay? Let's say 3,200 grams. That's pretty good. That's 2 kilos of weight savings per side. But this is as it came straight from the mold. So no paint, no clear coat, nothing. This is just the raw product. We did have to sand it down a little bit because where the two halves of the mold meet, there's a little extending gap of epoxy you need to sand away, which is here and here where the two halves of the mold meet. So all of the carbon product will get painted, but the reason I did it this way is because I wanted to leave some visible carbon parts. So at least this side, and maybe over the inner part when you open up the hood, we'll see. But yeah, this outer side is gonna get painted in the same body color. Now, on a final note, the reason this came out glossy out of the mold is because the mold surface itself is also glossy and polished. So the way the mold surface is the exact same as you're gonna get in the product. Meaning, if the mold is glossy, you're gonna get a glossy product. But that also means if we sand it back down to a matte finish, then the product you get out of the mold will also have a matte finish. Something we've already done. And why did we already do it? Is, as you've seen in the video, the previous 2 attempts of the other side failed miserably. So when we made the third one, we kind of expected more failure. The morale was at an all-time low. So what happened? We took out the fender and we didn't film anything. I mean, why would you film it? You know, unpacking the fender, why would you film that? So we didn't film that. So we're gonna save you all that boring stuff and show you the finished product. So yes, we made one in a matte finish, already trimmed up, ready to go in the car. I'll show it to you guys now.
L'amour qui chante doucement dans mon cœur. L'amour sans logique à la raison.
Alright, we finally have most of the components to finish the front end, minus the hood, which we'll tackle later on. You see, back there we have a new front end grille. The one we had previously was damaged. We finished both front fenders. We have one in glossy finish and one in satin. This is gonna get sanded down to a satin finish for now, because I like satin. You'd think this is an easy part to get. And it is, there are plenty online. And these idiots are asking 200 euros for a used one. You wanna know what it costs new at BMW? Same, 200. So yeah, we bought a new one.
Yeah, I'm overzealous when I'm thinking about the cash flow. I never had no handouts, just came natural. I've been testing so much, all these wrestlers nice. All these different situations that I've been through. I seen pain trying to creep in through the window, but now I'm sliding through the hood in a Benzo. You gotta separate yourself just to elevate. I keep some drink in my cup to see through the hate. Sometimes on the road to glory, you gotta press the brakes. I got a lesson plan for all my past mistakes. I swear I'm proud of all my best and my worst days. Proud of all my feet when I touch the ground. Front of 8 at Beijing, man, ain't know the sound.
The next day.
All right, so Cho's on his Make-A-Wish date with Katy Perry or something, I don't know. So this weekend, we're on our own. We're gonna finish the front end. I don't know, something. Maybe turn off copyright music.
Mondays is for drinking to the seldom sinking. I've been working on a cocktail called Grounds for Divorce. Whoa. Polishing a compass that I hold in my sleeve.
Alright, I just finished filming all of the last bits and pieces for the final reveal. I didn't film the last piece of assembly with aligning stuff, which take like 6 hours. Didn't film putting on the trims, tiny parts. I wanted to save that for a more grand reveal. So there you go. Enjoy the end result.
And the rest you can keep, and the rest you can keep. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. There's a hole in my neighborhood down which of late I cannot help but fall. Mondays is for drinking to the seldom sinking.
Alright, so that took a lot more time than we thought it would. However, it turned out pretty fucking good. I'm really happy with how everything turned out. However, keep in mind, all of the panels you see are gonna get painted in the original color, which is red. Same for the rims, they are just temporary, stolen off of the GTR. Well, we do have some more work exterior-wise. We still gotta choose a wing and we gotta deal with the rear fenders, which is in itself difficult enough, but we'll get to that in a later stage. And now that this is done, we can focus on some other stuff, and maybe in the future we'll do some other stuff on the car in carbon, we'll see.